Hi, this is Mike Bloom, Academic Technologist for the Humanities at the College of William & Mary. We recently spoke to Rachel DiNitto, Professor of Japanese, and one of her students, Pam Kennedy. They worked together to produce a course that was driven by a blog that they had the students write. And, well, let's listen to them talk a little bit about the course and how they used the technology.
The class was set up to look at the recent, say, past 10, 15 years worth of mass importation of Japanese pop cultural products. And it's been called, in a famous article by Douglas McRae in Foreign Policy, it's been called Japan's gross national cool. So we were trying to look at this model of cultural production, cultural importation, what happens when these new media products like anime and manga and Hello Kitty and film, everything comes into the U.S. It seems to be dominating U.S. markets, so maybe there's a change in cultural flows from east to west instead of west to east. But Pam was TA for this class, and she came to every class. And so she was essentially taking the class, but she wasn't a registered student. We had about 20 students. It was split between half and half, about half on the Japan side and then half on LCST 351. So some of the students had knowledge of Japan, and like Pam, East Asian Studies majors, some students had no knowledge at all. So it was a pretty mixed bunch, which is nice. The second half of the semester, students were creating the blog posts on some aspect of gross national cool. So what we would do is have a reading for the class, and then we'd also have students presenting on their blog post, and they'd have to put discussion questions. So they'd have a blog post and have discussion questions, and they'd do a brief presentation. A lot of them had multimedia in there, so maybe we'd watch some of the clips, and then we'd talk about the post, and it was a chance it worked really nicely with some of the topics we were covering, and then it was a chance for them to get feedback on their posts, which they could then revise later on, and then the blog post also seeded the final papers. So it was really, the second half of the semester was really student driven. And the TA model really helped because the TA was able to give more kind of detailed attention to the students than I had time to give to everybody. And then I think students felt, and Pam, maybe you can talk about this, that there was a level of approachability.
Yes, it was easier to make meetings with the TA just because we're all students. So our time availability is much greater than a professor who's managing a bunch of classes at once.
And then some students said they just felt more comfortable talking to the TA because they didn't have to come in with these fully formed ideas.
I think the benefit of the WordPress-based blog is that we all know it's live on the internet. The wiki was accessible only to people taking the class. And it was really interesting hearing from the students that the attention they put into the work changed as they knew that anybody could Google this topic and their article would come up and anybody anywhere on the planet could read what they had written. So it really changed their writing style and the sources they use and how they were linking out and the multimedia they put in.
You know, Michael Cronin was looking for research on a film writer, and he saw this thing in Google, and it's interesting, and it turned out to be something from our class. So people are finding it.
That's very exciting.
Which is very exciting, and then, you know, we had a recent thing for one of the awardees for the graduation awards that I was able to link to the site and stuff, so it's come in handy.
It's on my resume, and employers are glad to hear that I can do a little bit of HTML, and everybody in the class knows how to work with some basic HTML like that. And it's good to be able to say that you've worked on a website. Most employers want to know that, so it's definitely a start. And it's also inspiring to keep learning new web programs and increase one's skill set. Really important.
When it came to doing the final papers, because these posts I saw as kind of seeding your final paper, students didn't want to be limited to a paper, and so a lot of them included hyperlinks or images or clips in the final papers because they submitted them all on Blackboard, so they're electronic. So I think it actually ended up affecting the format of the final papers, which made sense because of the stuff we're looking at, is in and itself multimedia. So I think they felt the final papers were, if anyway, more confining somehow.
Definitely. It's so much more fun, and it gives a new depth to write a paper that doesn't just have to be words, but that you can link videos and images. Almost everybody in the class used multimedia in their blog posts, so I'm not surprised that that carried over to the final paper. It can be difficult to write a paper, especially on a subject like pop culture, without showing images. So it was better to just go ahead and show the videos, or if you're writing about music, play the music. And it kept people awake in class too. It was much more fun to look at a blog post that had a lot of pictures and videos than something that was just like paragraphs, walls of text.
Yeah, and some of the most interesting discussions were about particular videos people showed in class, or songs. We had one student who's a music major, so he played, and there happened to be a piano in the room, so he played us some music clips, and then he showed us the progressions on the piano, and I mean, it was very multi-format in that way. A lot of those video clips, I'm stealing ideas from students for research projects, that I'm going to work on, hopefully present at some conference this fall or summer. So the students brought in all this really interesting information that I wouldn't have found either. So it was very much a shared project in the way that when people would talk about, they'd kind of present on their topic, and then we'd spend the whole rest of the class talking about it, and people were bringing all kinds of different ideas to the table. So, I mean, it's the best discussion I've ever had in any class I've ever taught, by far. I mean, I like working with TAs because, I think it gives a couple of things. It gives the students a different way to access the class and a different conduit, for information. So I could talk to Pam, and the students could come and talk to me, but I think they're more likely to come and talk to Pam because they felt Pam was, more approachable or easy or whatever. And then pedagogically, it kind of freed me up to think about some other things I wanted to oversee, and Pam could do some of the groundwork for me. But then we would meet once a week and kind of touch base on different issues, and then we've been talking a lot about how to restructure the site itself. So initially we just put it together as lists, like student bios and then student topics, and then we spent time in class talking about how could we restructure that page to make it more accessible or interactive, whatever. And so Pam and I've had a lot of talk about how we could kind of brainstorming how we could make that. And it was interesting to get feedback from the students too on how that site would be most appealing or most accessible to them. So I think it creates a way for faculty and students to team build something that Pam can talk about this, but that is not fully under faculty control. Like, the outcome is not determined.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. It was really fun because we just had the idea of doing a blog, and Professor DiNitto had a lot of great ideas, and then based on what people brought to the class, whether they're East Asian studies or literary cultural studies, everything developed in new directions. And so the final product is definitely the product of the whole class's discussion on what to do with the website, which I'm working on right now. And working as a TA is also really fun. You get to work with a lot of different students. I've worked with everyone in the class on their idea, from like the little seed of the idea growing into an entire post and a final paper. And it's been really interesting to see what everybody brings to the table. Especially, it was fun to work with literary and cultural students because they are coming in with a fresh perspective on Japan and a lot of theory background readings that they've done that I've never seen before as government and East Asian studies. So they brought so many new ideas. It was great. William & Mary doesn't have very many TA positions, which is one of William & Mary's strengths. You always have a professor teaching a class, not a student. But it's also been really fun because having a TA can really help develop a class. It lets the students work together separately on a project and then like bring the results to the professor who can help develop them further. So it's, for me, it has definitely been a growing experience. It's definitely helped my own research on Japan and helped me sort of narrow down what I want to continue studying about Japan in the future in graduate school and beyond. So it's a great experience.
And I can say clearly that the 2 times I've used TAs, the quality of the wiki or the blogs have been much higher than when I didn't have a TA.
In addition, like doing the TA work, I tried to work with people in groups as much as possible. Number 1, to save us all time, and number 2, so that we could all see what we're all working on, especially people of similar topics. And by doing that, I encouraged people to share sources they were accessing, which forced people to work together and get to know each other, and that promoted better classroom conversations. I think people definitely got to know each other by the end of the semester.
I want to keep the blog site going in some form or another, and I'm doing research now on contemporary Japan, so it's sort of a nice integration in that sense. I'm going to teach a freshman seminar in the fall called Japanophilia, and looking, kind of more historically at this importation and fascination with Japan. So I'm going to have a TA. One of the students from our class is going to be a TA for that class. So then hopefully they already are familiar with the site and with some familiarity with the technology, and then they can get more training in this new model you and I are trying to develop. It started out as a post-bubble culture site, and it started out as a bilingual site, and then it moved to this more kind of global view, and now I want to add a little more historical, maybe, background to it. So I don't know if I think it's going to maybe go above and beyond what the original site was. So I don't know what form is best to take for the new site. But then, we didn't really have a clear idea what form we were going to do for this class, and that developed on its own. So I don't want to impose too much of a form either, because I think that organic development was what made the class interesting.
Definitely. In general, the students really like working on a blog, because it also feels fresh and modern. Blogs are so big right now among students. And no negative feedback. Like, nobody didn't like working on the blog. There are just some hiccups along the way, but everything gets resolved by the end. By the end of the semester, everybody has these new computer skills they can use. Other than that, I have some friends who looked at the site who were outside the class, and they really liked seeing their fellow William & Mary students' works on the internet and available for everyone to see. Good feedback.
A number of them said, I'm really proud that my work is up there now and on the web and people can see it, and this was more interesting than just doing a regular traditional paper assignment. And so they liked the public aspect of it. They also liked the format, the new format possibilities, and they liked working with Pam. Because the first 2 students that posted did a fantastic job and set the bar really high. Nathan's post was fantastic.
Incredible.
So the bar was set really high, and I think that helped then keep the quality up too. So maybe that's a strategy thing. Have a really good student do the first one, because then you've got, or model it, and that's what we did in the other class, in the 4th year classes. I was part of the group, and I would put up a model for everything that we did. So there was an example up there. In this class I didn't have to, but I think those first posts set a model. The papers that have come out of this class have been really interesting papers. I don't know if that's a function of the blog, if it's a function of I'm getting research ideas out of these where I'm at, research-wise it's where I'm at currently, and so I'm more engaged with it as well. But I did have a sense that students were very engaged with the work in a way that they weren't in other classes. And I think that level of, and maybe it's because the topic is so current too, that level of engagement I think does produce better papers. I don't know, Pam, did you?
Yeah, if you're putting your name on it, and everybody did, like their full name is up on the blog site, everybody knows you're a William Ray student, and it's available to the public, yeah, that really encourages some greater quality, I think, than a paper that disappears after a while.
And all the posts are linked to bios, and that was really fun too because the students got to create their own bio. So they got to present themselves as whoever they wanted to be, and they had to link somehow their interest in Japan. So that was really nice too, as a kind of pedagogically to understand who your students are, instead of you creating questions for them at the beginning of the semester. You know, what classes have you done? That they kind of created their own profiles, and some of them use pictures of themselves, and some of them use like Hello Kitty photos, or I mean, it's all over the place, and put links to these like wacky Japanese sites they like to go to. So it was a very revealing thing too, that maybe you don't reveal yourself that much in a student-faculty relationship otherwise.
Well, that's all for today. This is Mike Bloom for Pablo Yanez. We'd like to thank Rachel and Pam for sharing their experiences with us. We'll see you next time on Teachnology.